Andrew hit us up from Jonesboro, Georgia. Peach State representing this morning. He said, will James Franklin ever face competitive pressure like Kirby Smart or Ryan Day, i.e. 10-2 with losses to Michigan and Ohio State, a Rose Bowl appearance, just not cutting it anymore? And he just described Penn State's 2022. That would be insane if anyone ever said that. I thought Penn State had one of the best years that they've had under James Franklin last year. Not a perfect season. This is like when people talk about politicians. They always preface it in this day and age with, no, I don't agree with everything he says. No, I don't agree with everything she says. It's like with James Franklin, people say, no, he's not the best coach in the world. No, he's not perfect. Let's just assume that no one's perfect, and let's just assume there's one Nick Saban out there, and let's assume no politician's perfect. Just say what you think. You don't have to preface it. No one really cares anyway. So with James Franklin, I don't really care that he's not perfect. I think he is way, way up there right now. And last year, you just described it, 11-2. They lost to Michigan. They lost to Ohio State. Those two teams were in the playoff. Those were two of the four best teams in the country last year. So you could, theoretically, you could lose to those two teams. Theoretically, you could be the third best team in the country if you pick up what I'm putting down there. You could be the fifth best team in the country. And just because you happen to have those teams on your schedule, you lose to both of them, people say, it's not good enough anymore. Oh, it's good enough. It's plenty good enough. If 11-2 in a Rose Bowl victory is not good enough at Penn State, your coach is not the problem. You have become the problem. And I know most Penn State fans don't think like this. And I know the person asking our question here doesn't necessarily think like that. He's just asking because we've heard that kind of talk around Ryan Day. Ryan Day's in one of the most unique positions in college football right now, in that he keeps on winning a ton of games in the regular season. Then the last 2 years, he ran up against Michigan with everything postseason related on the line, or so it seemed, and they've lost. So they haven't played for the Big Ten championship the last 2 years. They ended up getting in the playoff last year, but people are talking like his job's on the line. I told you on the last show we did, I got to see that to believe it, but I also know how seriously they take that whole galaxy of the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry in Buckeye land and in Wolverine land. That's its own thing. It's like a one-game season. So if you start losing several games in a row, that's a big deal for them. Now, if you live in Kansas, you're listening to me and you say, what do you mean several games in a row? He's lost 2 in a row. You know the last time that happened? Anyone? Because we said that on the show the other night too. It's been the entire lifetime of a college-aged student right now since that's happened. It was back at the turn of the millennium. That's the last time that Ohio State has lost 2 games in a row to Michigan. So 3 games in a row, I think, was like 95 or something like that, the mid-90s. No one who's 23 years old remembers that. There's a whole generation. And then there are people who are 53 years old who have conditioned themselves to think, nope, that can't happen here anymore. Yeah, it happened once upon a time. It's the Great Depression happened once upon a time. Hopefully we've taken steps to rectify the financial system. I've got every finger crossed right now that we've taken those steps to where we don't have to deal with that again. At Ohio State, they think that they've sort of Michigan-proofed the program. Maybe there's a loss every now and then. That's the way football happens, but we're not going to have a string of losses, especially when we've out-recruited them. We have no sanctions hanging over us. There's no chain around our ankle. Nothing's holding us down. If we're holding us down, then we're going to make sure we don't hold us down. That's the talk. That's the talk around Ohio State right now. At Georgia and Kirby Smart, second year, comes within an overtime period away from beating Nick Saban and winning a title, but he didn't. And then the next year, they're in the SEC title game against Bama again, and they come close again. There's a Hail Mary attempt at the end of regulation, but they don't get it done. And they had a really good team, one of the best programs in the country, but all they kept saying down in Jonesboro, Georgia, and everywhere surrounding it was, well, if we can't beat Saban, we can't beat Alabama, what are we really doing? Well, I'll tell you what they were doing. I'll tell you what Ohio State's doing, and I'll tell you what Penn State's doing, playing some of the best football in the country. There's only one team per year that can play the best football in the country. And there's a lot of teams out there that are far closer to playing the best football in the country than being hot garbage. But there is also a zero-sum mentality out there. You either are a national champion, you either are in the playoff every year, or we got to make changes. No, that's how you get yourself That's how you get yourself in a situation like some of these programs that have been in the wilderness for several years. That's how you become Texas football. That's how you get yourself in the mess Tennessee's been in for quite a while, until very recently. So you ask them, you go ask a Tennessee fan 3 years ago, hey, if you didn't beat Bama or Georgia, but you got to the Sugar Bowl and got a win, would that be a good year? They would not let you finish the sentence before they asked, where's the clipboard? Where do we sign? Where do we sign? Texas, same thing. You lose, maybe you lose to Oklahoma, but you still go to the Fiesta Bowl and you win. They're not happy about the loss to Oklahoma, but man, it beats what the alternative was for several years. He faces competitive pressure, does James Franklin. He faces it, yeah. But like I said the other night, and I'll say again, and then we'll move on, there is nobody outside the walls of that athletic facility that's putting more pressure on Penn State football than they put on themselves. And I think they're set up this year, and I'll talk about this plenty over the summer. I think they're set up this year for several reasons to have maybe the best shot at this whole playoff thing as they've had in several years, if not period, under James Franklin. They've had some good teams up there, but man, this is not one where they're talking about one-star player. I think Preview Magazine culture will talk about Drew Aller, and they may talk about those running backs. But man, I'm looking at several different layers of that team. There's not a massive weakness. That's not something we've said about Penn State. It wasn't but 2 years ago they couldn't run the ball. And now they may have one of the best running back tandems, not only in the Big Ten, but in college football. So excitement here. Take it from a guy who wears nothing but white T-shirts, at least when we're on Late Kick Live. I'm excited about Penn State this year.